Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Trek Mission Log. My name is Jason Gilbert, and I am so glad that you're here. First of all, I want to apologize that I was not able to get a video out last week. Just life gets in the way sometimes, and the next month or two is going to be crazy busy for me. So my videos are going to be somewhat sporadic. Hope you can understand. I will get them up as I can, and I got to work around a very busy summer schedule this year. And if you enjoy this content, would you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? It would really mean a lot to me personally, and it would really help this channel out a lot. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you don't, okay? And also just share these with your friends. I'd love to see this channel grow some more, and I am so grateful for your patronage and faithfulness to this channel. So today we're going to be looking at Season 2, Episode 21, titled Patterns of Force. And this is going to be an interesting episode, so you're going to want to watch all the way through it. And in just a moment, we're going to dive in. But before we do, why don't you check out this piece of Trek trivia, and then we will come right back. The Enterprise is approaching a couple of planets, Zeon and Ekos. Specifically, they are headed toward Ekos to discover what has become of John Gill. He was Kirk's history professor at the Academy, and Spock said he learned all about Earth history by reading his material. The Federation have not heard anything from him in over 6 months. Now, as they are approaching the planets, a missile with a thermonuclear warhead approaches the ship. It is from the planet Ekos, and it indicates that that civilization should not be so far advanced as they are. The Enterprise destroys the warhead. When McCoy mentions that they shouldn't be so far advanced, Kirk said, well, maybe they had help. And the screen zooms in on a picture of John Gill. We then fade into the title sequence. When we come back, the weapon that was fired at them was a thermonuclear device, which this planet should not have. Still no response from John Gill. The ship is at maximum orbit, staying undetectable from detecting devices. Kirk makes a decision to beam down with Spock, with one precaution, that they have transponders inserted into them in case they cannot communicate, and the transponder would relay their position to the Enterprise for a quick beam up. After that is inserted into them, Spock and Kirk are disguised, and they beam down to the planet, and they notice that the architecture is similar to 20th century Earth. A man is running and tells Kirk and Spock to hide. 2 Ecosian soldiers emerge and kick the man, calling him a Zeon pig. We then see that the soldiers are wearing Nazi uniforms. Shortly after they leave, a broadcast is showing the Nazi Ecosians taking Zeons as prisoners. They show a man named Melicon awarding a Medal of Honor to someone, and then they all saluted the Fuhrer, John Gill. A soldier notices Kirk and Spock on the street, and with a powerful Shatner chop, Kirk subdues him and knocks him out cold. He took his gun and told Spock to take his uniform. A Gestapo Ecosian emerges and Spock knocks him out with a Vulcan nerve pinch. Kirk now has a uniform. As they approach headquarters, a major confronts Spock for not saluting. The major orders Spock to remove his helmet. He obeys, and the major and the others that were looking on were shocked at Spock's pointed ears. We then see the major having Kirk and Spock whipped, trying to get information out of them. Kirk says that he will only speak to the Fuhrer. Then the chairman of the party came in and ordered that they be locked up so that they could absorb and feel their pain more, and that later he would interrogate them. So they're put behind bars. Kirk was saying that Gil was a kind and gentle man, and it is impossible that he is a Nazi. There was another prisoner there as well, a Zeon. He told them that the Zeons are a peaceful people. They are not a warring people. But a few years ago, the Nazis branded them as a threat to keep their party united in hate. Spock said that that timeline lines up with when Gil arrived. Kirk came up with a plan to use the transponders that were implanted in them, and specifically the crystals in them, against the light bulb to create a beam that can cut through the prison lock. And it worked beautifully. Their goal was to get to the laboratory so they can get their communicators and phasers back. They let the other prisoner out and he guides them. And they make it to the laboratory and they find their communicators, which have been completely disassembled. Their phasers were not there. Spock puts on the uniform. They carry the Zeon outside and he leads them to a manhole, and they are led to an underground Zeon place of safety. Their leader, named Abram, told his friend that the Nazis killed his fiancée. Spock asked for a quiet place to work, and it was granted to him. Spock successfully rebuilds one communicator by using parts from both. Suddenly, the female Nazi who was given an award on the screen earlier comes in with a gun to begin to interrogate Kirk. She points the gun at Abram and kills him in cold blood. However, it turns out that it was a ruse to test Kirk and Spock. These people needed to be sure that they were not Nazi spies. We then hear a story of how Melikon, the deputy Fuhrer, took over. Kirk wanted to talk to Gil to find out what happened. They tell Kirk that the Fuhrer is going to make a speech that night. The lady is going to be there, and Kirk wants her to get them past the guards. We then see how. She disguises them as filmmakers making a Nazi documentary. They enter a large room where we see Melikon interacting with other members of the party. They get in and they find out where Gil will be making his speech. There is a room on the other side, a private room where he will be filmed, and he's hidden behind a curtain. They go out to the hallway to see if they can get into that room. Spock peeks in and he sees Gil being put in place behind the desk. Kirk wants to try to get into that room. Spock mentioned that it was indeed Gil that he saw, but that he never moved a muscle. He may be under some form of psychosis, or he may be drugged. Kirk said that they need McCoy there to find out. Spock tries to communicate with the ship, and they are successful, and Kirk orders that McCoy be fit into a Gestapo uniform and that he be beamed down. The female Nazi leader, her name is Daros. She lets them know that the Nazis picked up their communications and are searching for them. McCoy beams down, dressed in a Gestapo uniform. They now listen to Gil's broadcast. He's perfectly still, and he's stringing together incoherent sentences. McCoy told Kirk that he definitely looks drugged. So they go out to the hall, they subdue the guards, and they get into where Gil is. And indeed, he has been heavily drugged. And while they're looking looking over him and examining him, Melicon is giving a speech that is in effect telling the people that they are going to eradicate the Zeons from Ekos. McCoy gives Gil a stimulant, and he does not come to, so Kirk orders Spock to do a Vulcan mind meld. Spock begins the mind meld, and he gets Gil to a place where Gil could answer questions. Kirk asked him why he interfered with this culture. He said that the planet was fragmented and divided. He took a cue from Earth history, and he chose the Nazi Party because it was the most efficient state the world ever knew. Just then, guards came in, and they made it look like they captured Spock as a Zeon spy. Kirk suggested that they hand him to Melicon as a present, and that's just what they do. Meanwhile, Kirk stays behind and gives Gil a very strong dose of the stimulant. He said that he wants Gil to speak. Meanwhile, Melicon puts Spock down in front of everybody by talking about his low forehead and his malformed ears, and he said he wants the prisoner interrogated and then studied. Suddenly, Gil appears on the screen, and he is speaking. And he orders that the immediate attack of the space fleet be called to stop. He said that this was the act of one traitor, and then he names Melicon. Melicon goes up to the curtain and fires his machine gun, killing Gil. Then Zeon pulled out his pistol and killed Melicon. In his dying moments, Gil told Kirk that he was wrong. He said that even historians don't learn from history and make the same mistakes. And then Gil dies. Deros and two Zeons thank Kirk for their help. As they said that they would forge a new path for both the Zeons and the Ekosians to live in peace together. Back on the Enterprise, Spock said that he did not understand humans. Kirk said that Gil drew the wrong conclusions from history. The Nazis were a brutal people, but the people were not the problem. The leader was. A very good conclusion to a good episode. Patterns of Force is a well-executed, fast-paced, thought-provoking episode that keeps you watching to the very end. So many good elements to this and some very good lessons to learn, especially in our day and age. First of all, it's a great story. A highly decorated Federation historian goes to a planet to check on its progress, to observe, and then stops contacting the Federation. So the Federation send the Enterprise to investigate, and as they approach, they are shocked by a nuclear warhead in the style of the 20th century being fired at them. They destroy it, and it leads them to believe that this culture has been contaminated by the very professor that they are looking for. And Kirk has trouble believing it. Now, I want to pause here for a minute. Imagine that you had a mentor in your life who helped shape you into the person that you are today. And then in 20 or so years, you catch up with them. And after 20 years of using the knowledge that they gave you, you discover that they have indeed abandoned those principles and have embraced something else entirely. How would that make you feel? Personal story. You may or may not know I am a pastor in a small town church. I've been doing this for 25 years. When I was in seminary, I had two professors that I looked up to who helped shape my theology and my understanding of God. And about 5-6 years after I graduated, I found out that these two professors left our denomination to go to a different denomination that teaches an entirely different theology. And I want to admit to you that I struggled with that for a very, very long time. Now, I know that doesn't compare on as grand a scale as it would to a story like this. When Kirk and Spock beam down, they discover the culture there has fashioned itself after the Nazi Party, circa 1930s to 1940s, Nazi Germany. They discover also that the Nazi Ecosians are engaged in ethnic cleansing to eradicate people from a neighboring world, the Zeons. So right at the onset, this is a big, big story. Then we see Nazi propaganda on a large screen of their military campaigns. And at the end of the video, the Fuhrer is revealed, and it's John Gill. Shocking moment. It is Kirk's beloved history professor. Now, I loved this idea. It was translated very well on screen, and the acting was incredible. By the way, that scene reminded me a little of the book 1984, where there were screens set up all over the place for Big Brother to spew his propaganda. I know that not too long ago, novels and films about dystopian futures were very popular to watch, and this episode certainly had that dystopian vibe. And here's Star Trek using this in 1968, 40 years before The Hunger Games was published. The rest of the story is the landing party trying to get to the bottom of this. Kirk wants to talk to Gill to find out what happened and why. I love the acting in this episode. Shatner and Nimoy are incredible. In the whipping scene, Spock was almost smiling while he was being whipped. I love that. We find out that there is a Zeon underground trying to fight against the tyranny. We learn that there are Zeon sympathizers in the Nazi Party. And we also learn that one man, who was an evil opportunist, Melicon, drugged Gill to secretly lead the party. You talk about an involved story. This one could have easily been a two-parter. Of particular interest to me, as a bit of a history buff, when Spock is revealed to Melicon. Melicon gives him a going over, talking about Spock as if he were a freak of nature. The low forehead indicates stupidity, and the malformed ears, and etc. You know, these types of things were used by the Nazi Party against the Jewish people. They would call them pigs and rats, and they would put all kinds of propaganda out there. This episode of Star Trek was such a powerful one. I love the scene where Kirk is questioning Gill, and he asks why he used the Nazi Party as a means to interfere in this culture. And his response was that something had to be done because the planet was divided. He needed something to bring them together. And he chose the Nazi Party because it was the most efficient state in history. And indeed it was, as Spock pointed out. However, what Gill intended to use for good ultimately became an evil thing. Which leads me to say this. I believe with all of my heart that every attempt at socialism has ended and will end in this way, with the government in power exerting total control over its people. We've seen it all throughout history. We see it today with governments taking their countries in socialist directions. Sadly, it is happening here in my country of Canada. And that, combined with the movement to erase history, it will only prove to be futile. You see, if we don't learn from the mistakes of history, we are doomed to repeat history. So this episode is very, very important. It is thought-provoking. I'll even say this, if I were a history teacher, I would include this episode as part of the curriculum. Some very, very good lessons here. So I give Patterns of Force 5 out of 5 Starfleet insignias for awesomeness. You need to watch it. Well, that wraps up this edition of Trek Mission Log. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed putting it together. Please drop some comments below. I would love to read your thoughts on this one. I love reading all of your comments. I try to respond to them all. And I even enjoy the ones that disagree with me. You know, there's no way that we can all agree all the time. And so I enjoy reading those as well. Next time, I will be reviewing the episode titled By Any Other Name. And I wish you all a good weekend. Take care. Live long and prosper.